What I noticed is that some traders just took off. They took our method. It was consistent. We had a method that just minted money. And some traders were not able to manage that.
From the outside looking in, it can sometimes appear that peak performers have an elusive talent or skill that sets them apart from the rest of us. However, what usually sets peak performers apart isn't what they can do, it's what they will do. You are listening to the Trading Edges Podcast, the podcast dedicated to seeking and sharing the best ideas and principles from peak performers across all domains of performance and achievement to help you discover your full trading potential.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is Houston, and welcome to the 10th episode of Trading Edges, brought to you by thetradingedge.org. Now, I can't believe we're already 10 episodes in. Thank you once again for tuning in to another episode of the show. We've got a lot more on the way, so head on over to the blog at thetradingedge.org and subscribe to our newsletter to stay in touch and get insider access to content that you won't find anywhere else. If you're enjoying these podcasts, please leave us a review on iTunes. But just as important, if you know of someone who would benefit from these podcasts, please share and help us get out our message. Now, let's talk about today's show. In this episode, I had the opportunity to deep dive into the topic of developing the ideal trading mindset with Rich Friesen. Rich brings a deep wealth of knowledge around this topic, drawing on his many years as a broker, a floor trader, a financial software developer, and entrepreneur. Now, he mostly works with financial professionals, independent traders, business leaders, entrepreneurs, anyone who wants to expand their mental game to make more consistent profits. So, in this show, we cover a lot of ground, but here are the big ideas. Number one, how most of us grew up in what Rich describes as the two-storey nut house, and how that affects our beliefs and behaviors. Rich describes to us what a NEME is, or a neuro metastructure, and how we use NEMES as the lens in which we perceive the world and support our beliefs. Number three, why suppressing feelings and emotions is simply a stabilizing a system that will not deliver the benefits we really want. And how he believes the more integrated path forward is to look for ways to constantly create rapport within oneself. Number four, why the path towards creating a better trading mindset is through what he calls the triple A's: awareness, acceptance, and then action. Number five, Rich shares a really fun exercise on how to create an internal technical indicator, an indicator that actually tracks your internal physical and emotional states. It's a really great exercise. Not only does this exercise improve your awareness, but it also gives you, just like any indicator, an indication on when you should be trading or not. Number six, Rich answers the question on whether all traders come preloaded with emotional baggage when they come to trading. And finally, number seven, why you need to be aware of any trading coach who tells you that you need to have more discipline. So, as always, you can find the show notes, transcript, and resources at thetradingedge.org/episode 10. Now, on to the interview. Good morning, Rich. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day in Marin, just north of San Francisco. I ran the dog this morning. There's a blue sky with occasional puffy clouds, and it's a wonderful day here.
I'm glad to hear that. Well, thank you so much for joining the show. Before we get started today, I just want to quickly introduce Rich Friesen. Rich has a really long history with financial markets, and I'll get him to give you his background in a few moments. But what really drew me to Rich's work is that he spends a great deal of his time coaching traders around a multitude of topics, but specifically what caught my eye was around the topics of trading psychology and mindsets. And what I really appreciate about his work is that he layers in many different layers. So there's the elements of neuroscience, elements of kind of NLP work, and psychology. So before I deep dive too much further, maybe I'll just ask Rich to quickly give us his background, as well as maybe how he's been involved in the financial markets.
Great. I started out as a philosophy major in school, and also ran a family retail business. I was a glass blower for many years. But after I saw the end of the kind of arts and crafts movement in the late 70s, I moved to the financial markets and went to work for Merrill Lynch as a futures salesman to get my feet wet. I had also had a friend from college, Joe Ritchie, and you can read about him in the name. Just dropped the name of the book, but I'll get it to you for you in a second.
Sure.
And he started a company called CRT, Chicago Research and Trading. So I went and leased a seat on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange and was going to start just trading on my own. And he says, well, just come work for us. And I did. And that is the start. A short story is when I was training with CRT.
And what year was this?
That was in 1983.
Okay.
And I was on the floor of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. I was trading options on the S&P futures. And my trainer said I was the worst trainee he had ever had. And he could have been a little more diplomatic. But nevertheless, he was right. And this has been foundational to me because when I started trading on my own and started trading my own money, I started keeping notes on everything. Every little bit I learned, and I had a 6-inch stack of cards with tiny print on both sides. And that eventually became a training manual for the firm I built, Trade Management, which was one of the most consistently profitable options trading firms on the floor of the Pacific Exchange. And the reason is that I really, since I started from ground zero, like many of the traders who are listening to this, I had to claw my way up the learning path. And my job was to make that path easy for the traders who were trading my money. And we became a successful trading firm. And until I sold it, and then I went and created an online trading exchange, which developed many patents, and eventually all that was sold to Hitachi.
Interesting. And then how did you get into the game of coaching retail traders? So after that, fast forward us.
Yeah, well, while I was still very young, I also got a master's degree in clinical psychology. I spent 4 years training at the Gestalt Institute, which is the Fritz Perls offshoot in San Francisco. And more recently, I have master's certification in neuro-linguistic programming. So my interest in psychology has been there for a long time. And so when I was building my own trading firm, what I noticed is that some traders just took off. They took our method. It was consistent. We had a method that just minted money. And some traders were not able to manage that. So what I said was, man, what is the problem? So I did more training and more this and more that. And it seemed to matter. And says, well, I guess I have to let these go. And I had a talk with my sister, Wendy, who was a budding hypnotherapist. She had just gotten certified and she was eager to ply her trade. And she says, let me give a whack at it. So what we discovered was that the issue in these traders was not the methodology. It was not the markets, but it was the space between their ears.
Nice.
And so we discovered stuff like one of the traders would get to a certain level in his equity and then he would lose it. And he'd get back up and lose it, get back up and lose it. And through hypnosis, we discovered that out of respect and devotion to his father, it would have been an insult to his dad to make more money than his father. Now, totally out of conscious thinking, totally out of awareness. But that subconscious belief, whenever he got there, he would figure out ways to not make money. Another one came from a long line of poverty in West Virginia. A bunch of basically hillbillies. And the big numbers in his bank account created so much discomfort to his core identity. He couldn't relate to his family anymore in the same way, so he would give it back. Another one, his mom, he had a severely handicapped brother and a single mom, And he knew if he started making money, his mother would come after him for some money. And given the family conflicts, given the lack of clear feelings toward his mom, though that conflict allowed him to sabotage his trading account. So then I started thinking, wow, I wonder what is going on here. And I have another story about myself. If we're interested, we can tell about later how I discovered some of my own psychological limits.
So is there one clear-cut path to success, or do you have to really chunk it down to the individual and say, all right, we have to work on this person's, on a case-by-case basis to figure out what's going to work for that individual?
Well, the answer is yes to both. There's, as I say, the questions that I get over and over again, and we've done over 1,000 assessments and surveys.
Yeah.
And they're all pretty well the same. And that's because we're all operating with the same human brain, the human brain that developed on the savannas of Africa for our survival. And so as a result, those common kind of things to us is where in the mind muscles for traders training is that we deal with those common things. Now, in addition to those, like the trader who couldn't make more than his father out of love and devotion to him, that's an individual thing. So yes, we have a common brain. Yes, we have common biases. Yes, we make the same persistent trading errors because of that. And then we layer on top of that our own individual limitations that keep us from the success we want.
Interesting. So what are then the biggest mistakes that you commonly see with traders? Are there places in terms of the development that you usually see traders kind of get stuck or have challenges at?
Yeah. The list is pretty common. And the one that comes up, in fact, I could open a survey, but I'll see what I can remember.
Sure.
Confidence in my strategies, executing my strategies consistently.
Right.
Changing my behavior after a string of losses, like revenge trading. Changing my trading behavior after a string of wins, as in cockiness. Inability to move from successful sim trading to real trading. So that's, the things that are on top of the list. Other things are unable to pull the trigger, fear of loss, inability to see the setups and see the trading as it is in real time. When I look back on it, things are obvious, but in real time, my brain shifts and I filter things in ways that doesn't serve my trading. So those are kind of the basics, and there's a lot more nuances to those, and there's a lot more variations.
Yeah.
What we do in our boot camp course is, in fact, I'm going through this right now. We're running a boot camp from now through the end of the year. And I list all the issues that the traders have in a spreadsheet. So like I just was working with one of my traders last night, and he has a big list. He has like 9 issues. Generally, we get down to 3 or 4. And then we say, what state of mind would you like that would resolve this issue? And then we create a state of mind in a positive description. So if, for example, the problem is a fear of taking of losing money.
Yeah.
Then we would say on the opposite side, the joy of trading a statistical edge.
Right.
So
taking that belief and kind of turning it around.
Right. So what we do is then we step inside that positive experience. Now, this is interesting because in my world, in my model, the brain will help us go to places that feel better. That in the moment, and I'm positing a model here, that we always make choices that feel better. We never move to a choice that feels worse. So even the heroin addict who knows that, this eventually is going to kill him, in that moment, it feels better to have that shot than to stay with his present experience. Even soldiers in World War II, when they were storming the beaches of Normandy and they opened those landing craft, even knowing that they might die, it felt better to get out of that craft than to let down their fellow soldiers and their comrades. So if we're working with that model, and again, everything I do is just a model, and I can talk about why I phrase things that way. But if we're working with that model and we only make choices that feel better in the moment, then our job as coaches is to organize exercises and simulations that allow us to experience that feel better in the moment, so we have a place to go. And once we have a place to go, our subconscious can start working on it. But most of the traders that start with a boot camp with me, I ask them to experience that feeling of where they really are and where they want to be. And most of them are unable to experience it viscerally. So my job is to get them to experience viscerally. And we could go on and what stops them. And many times there's a lot of things in, and this you may not even believe me, Houston. But a trader says, I want to make a lot of money. That's what his goal is. And I will say, well, having that, what of value will you lose? Oh, nothing. It's great. I'm going to be rich.
It's
I'll
upside,
get laid more.
right?
My parents will respect me. Oh, that's going to be wonderful.
Right.
But when we really start to work on it, that state is out of their identity. It's out of their belief system. They will lose their friends. Rich people are bad. But they don't. And we need to really recognize what value system they have and how that success will conflict with it. So by viscerally experiencing that new state of mind, we now have the place for us to go to. And if we get to that state, we know we've cleared out all the ecological and other issues that may be surrounding it.
Right. So is that the idea that perhaps, you have a certain ingrained set of habits that you're currently operating from, and that you need to, we've heard that, you can't get rid of habits, so you can simply replace old habits with maybe better ones. So is that kind of the idea there, where you're, creating a new visceral experience, something that they can now float from one, this kind of old crappy ones that aren't working for you, and then kind of float into these new ones that are more conducive to whatever behavior you want?
Well, I think you just put your finger on a really important point. And that is, I'm going to back up a little bit to answer that question. Most of us grew up in what I call the two-story nut house. And what that means is on the top story, we have our neocortex, our thinking, rational part of our brain.
Yeah.
This is the part that makes excellent decisions, looks into the future, kind of calculates everything we need to do and makes the perfect, wonderful decision.
Completely rational.
Totally rational. Spock, like really good. On the lower story, however, we have our devil, our impulsive, our visceral, our greed, our fears. We have all these emotions and desires. And it's the job of our top story to discipline our bottom story so that it behaves itself. And so what happens is we have New Year's resolutions type therapy.
Right.
And it's like many coaches will tell their traders, say, well, just be more disciplined. Well, that's kind of like a track coach telling his sprinter, well, just run faster.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah, what's wrong with you? Just
move
run
those legs.
So what happens is in the two-story model, we have this top story that's constantly beating itself up. And then we get this. We get the rational part of our brain pushing, and then we have our visceral reactions pushing against it, and they're stabilized. There's a lot of pressure here on both sides, and this then becomes a stable system that, because of the pressure on both sides, becomes very difficult to break. So as long as we're trying to suppress those feelings, those emotions, and those parts of ourselves, what we're doing is we're stabilizing a system that will not deliver the benefits that we want. So, in my model, what we do is constantly look for creating rapport with ourselves.
I like that.
And what you said about, habit, and the way my model looks at it is we call them NEMES, N-E-M-E-S, or neural meta structures. And these neural meta structures are basically just neural connections in our brain.
Yeah.
And as you probably know, that neurons that fire together wire together. So if you think about driving the car for the first time, my gosh, do you remember all the things you had to think about? Putting a clutch in, putting it in, well, I'm giving away my age. You've probably never even driven a clutch car. But, and then you have to take your foot off the brake on the accelerator. You have to look around you. You have to steer. I mean, it's incredibly complex. But now I'm sure that you can drive on a freeway and have a conversation about trading psychology.
Don't even think about it. Yeah.
Don't even think about it. And that's because all these neurons that have fired together so many times, because they fired at the same time, they wire together.
Right.
So what we have is these NEMES in our brain. Now here's the escape from the two-story nut house. And this is really important. If you're listening to this and you can make this mental shift, it will change your life. And the shift is from being the good person, bad person. I grew up as an evangelical, so we had heaven and hell.
Yeah.
We had our spiritual side and our evil side. We had angels and the devil, so we had this split. So if we can move from that two-story nut house, from that two-story universe, into one where, well, we have some neural structures, some NEMES that no longer serve us.
Right.
Wow. And they were created originally with positive intention.
Right.
So when I'm working with traders and we have a persistent trading behavior, most of the time, and I have a process for doing it. If you're interested, we can talk about it a bit, but I have a process for locating the origin of that behavior. And every time, 100% of the time with my traders, it was created when we didn't have as many options and was created for positive intent. For example, many traders suffer from a critical voice in their head that every time they go to hear a trade, there's boom, 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 boom. What are you doing this? What about this? What about that indicator? That's not quite right. Well, if we go back and look at that critical voice, very often we had a critical parent. And what we wanted to do is beat them to the punch. We wanted to criticize ourselves and correct our behavior so we wouldn't suffer the pain of someone who we loved and trusted and needed so badly to be so hard on us. Now, that's not the only reason, but so that was created with positive intent for ourselves when we didn't have many choices.
Right.
And now, of course, in my model, the earlier that was created, and the closer we attached that to survival, to our very life. And I have traders who were beaten with rods and bleeding when they were 3 and 4 years old, and they still have the scars. Now, those survival instincts that were created that deeply and attached to survival then replicate themselves the rest of our lives. So then what happens is we filter our worlds to support that belief. And as a result, it is a self-fulfilling system because I know a woman who is constantly being rejected. And so it's like the other day I called her up and said, somebody was coming to town that we both knew. She said, oh, nobody told me. So in other words, here I just gave her the information. And her filter was, oh, I'm left out.
Yeah, she got defensive. Yeah.
Yes. So what we do is we filter everything we see to support that particular NEME or that particular belief system, and then it becomes self-fulfilling. So, but what if you move from the two-story universe of being a bad person to one where you just have a NEME? You just have a neural metastructure that no longer serves you. Now we can work with it and stay in rapport with ourselves, especially if we understand that it was originally created to serve us. And if we understand that survival mechanism or what good it does, then we can say, okay, how can we upgrade that neural circuit? How can we upgrade that process? And if that process in our brain understands that we aren't going to get rid of it, but we're going to upgrade it and improve it, then it can relax because it will not give up its survival function. In other words, if it's there for our survival, we can discipline it all we want, but our survival will always take precedence. Whew.
that was deep and layered. So let me try to unpack that a bit. So it sounds like all of us have these kind of mechanisms or beliefs we've put in place for protective reasons. They were originally intended for positive effects, but as we've matured and as we've entered into new endeavors, maybe they no longer serve us any longer. And instead of trying to fight them and push them down or discipline them, like you said, maybe the better approach is that we simply acknowledge them. We don't tie any kind of negative or poor self-worth for having these kinds of
Yes.
of beliefs or mindsets, and then we create something new. It's like you said, to upgrade our mindset or upgrade the beliefs so that we can then have something that's more conducive to the behaviors we want.
It's so well put. So what I do is I say, first it's awareness.
Yeah.
So first we become aware of them, and then you use the word acceptance, and that is such a powerful word. And then what we can do is it's a 3 A's, triple A, awareness, acceptance, and then action. And the action is to acknowledge the original intent, and then to look for better ways to express that original intention, let's say if it's safety
Yeah.
or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So oftentimes I will actually have people talk to themselves. I'll talk to their parts.
Yeah.
And they'll say, I am here to make sure that you can do your job. I'm fully going to support you of your job. And the job is not the dysfunction, but the job is its original intent of safety, for example. I'm going to make sure you're safe. So here's my risk management plan. If I follow this plan, are you comfortable with it? Yes. And you make an agreement.
Yep. Yep.
And then
And
once
so-
you make that agreement and that part of you is accepted, then you're trading and that part comes up, let's say it starts being critical, then you can say, oh, thank you, critical part. Thank you for coming up. I understand you're concerned about my safety, so let's
Right.
go back and talk about our agreement again.
Yeah.
So what you're doing is you are reprocessing that over and over again. And like most people know, a habit takes a while to do that.
Yeah.
But if you can do it with acceptance and you can do it with self-love and rapport, then it becomes easier to repeat because it feels so good to take care of yourself and love yourself.
Right. I like that approach. So we're going to get tactical in a few moments because I know you have a lot of ideas in terms of how, traders can actually make some changes, kind of brass tacks style.
I got 3 months of training, so
You try to squeeze it in the next half an hour.
right. But I tell you, we're going to get close, I think.
So maybe so let's start. So how do traders, what can they begin to get more attuned then with their emotions? What's a strategy or maybe an action they can take to say, all right, I believe you. I need to now, let me go inward. How can I actually get more attuned? Because a lot of us, we're not attuned with our feelings, right? We've been taught to push them down or to ignore them. So how do we start to open up and say, all right, I value what my feelings are?
Sure. One of the second course we have in our online course is your self-aware mind, bringing clarity and focus to your trading decisions. And here's an exercise that you can do on your own. It doesn't cost any money. And I can even send people directions if they want.
Sure.
But here it is. What you do is you take a piece of paper and you can make lines, or you can do it in an Excel spreadsheet or in a Word document. But you're going to set an alarm for depending on how frequently you trade or whatever, but let's just say every 10 minutes. And then you just take out your smartphone, set an alarm. And then when the alarm goes off, you just kind of freeze and say, what are my sensations? What are my physical sensations? And you take a trip from your nose to your toes, say, my jaw's tight, my chest is tight, I'm breathing hard, my heart rate is fast, my throat feels I got a lump in it, my foot is bouncing up and down, my back aches, I'm tightening my fists. So you just go through it. And here's the important part, you don't try to change a thing. It's really, really important, because if you try to change, you're going to screw this experiment up. All right. So then you do that until you're really good at just getting your physical sensations. That's the easiest thing to do, because you can literally take a trip from your top and start to just pay attention. So then after you've done that and you're really good and you're comfortable with it, then when the alarm goes off, you notice your feelings. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling happy. I'm angry. I'm pissed off. I'm frustrated. I'm at peace with myself. Whatever it is, you just start noticing your emotions and your feelings. And every 10 minutes, you just write them down. And then the last thing, which is the most difficult, but one which really provides a lot of benefit, is the quality of my thoughts.
Yeah.
My thoughts are self-critical. I'm so focused on my work, I don't even notice my thoughts, I notice my thoughts come and go, but they don't mean anything. Or right now I'm thinking I'm such a screwed up idiot. I have this critical voice. Or I'm listening to my spouse and I'm imagining them criticizing me for being a traitor. Whatever it is, you just write down the quality of your thoughts, positive, negative, and maybe a little bit of content. So you do that with your thoughts. Now when the alarm goes off, after you've gotten good at that, you do all three. And so what's going to happen is you're going to start to be aware when the alarm goes off. And eventually this practice will get you to the place where you notice in real time. So what we do is we create what we call the SET score, S-E-T, sensations, emotions, thoughts. And so, and again, I got more complete instructions for anybody that wants it. But what you can do is on a scale of -5 to +5 is to score yourself on your sensations. So let's say you had the stomach flu, a migraine headache, and you were throwing up, and you had the shakes, and you had a fever of 104. You might say my physical sensations are a -5. They're about as worse as they get.
Yeah. You're not dead, but it's pretty close.
But you wish you were. That's a good way of explaining it. -5 is you're not dead, but you wish you were. +5 is I've got diffused energy. My body's shaking. I'm looking all around. I'm kind of jumpy. My knees are going up and down. So you have the intense amount of undifferentiated energy. A 0 is, I exercised this morning. I'm eating well. My body feels at peace with itself. It's relaxed, but it has a lot of power there that I know I can use it. And it's just ready to serve me well. And that's a 0. So we have one is the low energy side, the other is the hyper energy, and the middle is the powerful, peaceful side. You do it same for emotions. If you're depressed, really depressed, and you're thinking about why should I live, that might be a -5. If on the other hand, you think you're a god and cocky and you just made 6 winning trades in a row and you're going to show that screwy market exactly what's going to happen and you can just do anything and you're on top of the world, that would be a +5.
Yeah.
0 is, the emotions is, I'm ready for whatever the market does. I'm at peace with myself. I have no agenda for the markets. I don't need to make money. Yeah. I'm just here to be in the flow. On the thought side, the critical, if you have a lot of critical thought, you are nothing but a piece of crap and that you ought to just kill yourself and, then it's -5. On the other hand, if the thought, again, is, you're a god,
right,
and you're this incredible person, well, then that's a +5. So what you do then is you add them all up, so you have a possible -15, which isn't very good, and you should give me a call right away.
Probably shouldn't be trading that day.
Yeah, right. Probably not. And then you have a +5 or +15, or you add them up and you divide it by 3. So you have a -5 and a +5 is possible. And a +5 means you are in a pretty highly agitated, positive, cocky state. And I developed a system I have a trading advisory team, and these are active traders who test things for me. And a couple of the traders there noticed that when they keep their set score next to their P&L, that there's a direct correlation. And so not only does this exercise improve your awareness, but also it gives you, it's just like any technical indicator of whether you should be trading or not.
Right.
So
it's a technical indicator of yourself.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And we can talk more about other things like that.
Yeah.
There was something else you asked about. Yeah, so self-awareness. So the important part of this exercise when you're doing the SET scoring is to say, that's interesting. Write it down, say, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow, I have that neural structure that's creating all these negative thoughts. Fascinating. Now, if you try to stop it by going back to the two-story nut house, then you're bringing up an awareness and you try to stop it, then that awareness is going to go hide because it doesn't like to get beaten up. So the important thing is to kind of tease it out. Think of it as a wild animal, and you're trying to tame it, and you do it very slowly, and you encourage it to come out. And when it comes out, or like, a dog, if every time I called my dog and it came and I beat it, the dog's not going to come
No, anymore.
So you don't want to beat yourself up.
Yeah.
Again, just think of this. Again, this is such a major shift in thinking, going from the two-story nut house to this is just an old pattern that no longer serves me. So just think about it. And the most important word that I can think of here is curious.
Yeah, I was thinking
Just
the exact same word.
be curious. Because curious means non-judgmental.
Yeah.
It means you're open. It means you're fascinated. And if you're a state of curiosity, that means everything else. That means you're in rapport with yourself, and that's really important.
Right. What a great exercise. And I've tried similar practice before, and I still do it now, actually. I have actually I was doing every 30 minutes. Similar exercise. I don't know where I got it from, but I was just capturing my feeling state. I wasn't getting quite as granular, but I was capturing it on the hour. And certainly it's a very valuable practice, but it's actually quite difficult as well. It's not easy to do. I know, it's easy simply to say, "Oh, I'm not going to do it right now. I'll do it, when I want to do it, when I feel better."
Right.
But I think, if you set it at the 10 minutes, it's actually going to be a challenge to do that exercise. So thank you for sharing that. I definitely would. I challenge other people who are listening to this podcast to give that a shot. Try it for a week or a month and see if you can track yourself for that amount of time.
Okay, can I reframe what you just said?
Sure.
Okay, it's going to be a challenge to do that. What we're setting that up is as a difficult problem.
Right.
So everybody listening to that has now shifted in, and their brains have associated that with other times in their lives where they've had a challenge and failed.
Yeah.
So let's
I can reframe that.
Yes.
I could say something along the lines of, maybe, would you be willing to try this for 7 days or maybe 30 days?
Right.
And seeing what comes out of that practice.
Yes. And let's find a way that it is so fascinating to make these discoveries that it feels good.
Yeah.
Again, if in my model we only move to new behaviors or new activities or beliefs that feel better, then let's create a way. In other words, give yourself a reward if you've done it for 3 days in a row. Take your boyfriend out for dinner, or do something nice and be so proud and look at that sheet and say, wow, look at what I'm discovering. I am changing my life around. I am starting to be in rapport with myself and figure out a way to have that. Everyone's different. So if I'm coaching a client, I will have a way for them to feel good about that. So figure out a way to feel good about it. And then if it feels good, it's not a challenge anymore.
Exactly. Now, I appreciate that a lot because, certainly we know that negative reinforcement works on some levels, and that can get you to do certain behaviors. But I think it's easy to be negative. I think, we're wired to be negative. So having that other frame seems to be a lot more gentle, and I think it's a lot more, maybe more, a little easier to take on for the long run, as opposed to saying, I got to be disciplined, I got to do this for the next week or 30 days. So
what I love about what you just said is the word gentle. I mean, I can feel an emotional rush just thinking about being gentle with yourself.
Yeah.
My God, we work so hard to beat ourselves up, to behave and to trade well and be disciplined. What if we were just gentle and kind with ourselves? One of the things that I always do in my coaching is move people towards self-rapport. Because ultimately that changes not just trading, but changes lives significantly.
Right.
And many of us have disciplined and negatively motivated ourselves to do certain behaviors that have been successful, so we've rewarded ourselves for it. And if we imagine taking that away, our mind goes to, oh my God, I'll just stay in bed all day. It's like we can't imagine a world where we're not beating ourselves up.
Right.
But I've had clients make that shift, and it turns out that we don't just stay in bed all day.
Yeah.
We tend to have more energy. We're in rapport with ourselves. We have all our parts working together, and my God, what a wonderful difference.
Yeah. And so what do you find when you work with traders? Because this kind of layers onto what you said. a lot of people seem to be very protective about their stories, right? Like you said, they don't want to get rid of those things because in some way it may have served them at some point in their life. So they're very attached to it. They've created very elaborate stories around why they need these things. Is it possible do you really have to go back in the past and kind of figure out why you know, my mom was bad to me, or my dad or my uncle or whatever? Do we need to get to that level of depth, or is it easier just to say, all right, I can just make a shift and just put the past in the past and go forward with things?
Yeah, in my model, what I do is I list all the issues that traders have. We have this graphics where we can see color-coded how they're progressing. And then below that, we have all their trading metrics, and we have some special ones that are really important. But below that, we have something I call belief, and then below that, identity. So that if we have persistent reds or persistent things, then we need to ask the question, what would somebody have to believe in order to consistently create that behavior?
Okay.
And if, in fact, that belief impacts on an identity issue, such as the trader I had whose identity was that of a poor person having grown up in poverty, then we need to look at some deeper issues around the beliefs about themselves and their identity.
Yeah.
But the point here is not like in analysis to spend years analyzing that, but to create behavioral change that serves us better. So we only look at those things. And when we look at those things, we don't ask the question why. Well, let me rephrase that. I never ask the question why, because the question why takes us to a neocortex, and then we make up BS in order to explain it. The real question for me is, what mechanisms are you using? What beliefs do you need to have? What is your identity that supports that? Okay, then once we've identified that, then the question is, does that still fit you?
Yeah. And then you can begin to create the action plan to begin to move that forward.
Right. And again, moving that forward by a series of successive experiences that each one feels better than the previous one, and that gets us to our goals. And sometimes people let go of their goals. I mean, that's also possible. A number of my traders come to the conclusion they shouldn't be trading, and I've saved them tens, in some cases hundreds of thousands of dollars, because they're trying to be successful traders to fill an emotional need that is not going to ever be filled. And so we redirect them to something that will do it. You know, for example, I had a trader in South Africa who wanted to make a lot of money, and so I talked to her for a long time, and and eventually got down to it. Having that much money, what will that do for you? Well, I'm really concerned about the lack of educational opportunities for a lot of the black teenage men, and as a result, they don't have any hope. They grow up jobless, and they commit crimes, and it becomes a huge problem. Okay, so having that, what will that do for you? Oh my God, it'll da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay, so then I've started coaching her on, let's go directly to that goal.
Yeah.
If that's what it is, what you want, well, I don't have any money. Well, there's a lot of people who care like you who do. Let's figure out how to make this work. And kaboom, all of a sudden she was now unified in her purpose rather than trying to go through the difficulty of trading.
Right.
So, you know, a lot of traders to ask yourself is, what is your having that success? What will that do for you? And maybe there is a more direct or better way to get there.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, in your opinion, do all traders come to the game with baggage, or have you ever met a trader who's like, you know what, I got my head on straight, I'm good to go. Just give me the system.
I would say yes, all traders. We all have baggage, but I got to admit, I did have an exception. I hired a clerk when I was building my trading firm, and his name was Tyson, and he clerked for me for just a short amount of time. Yeah. And he just seemed so at ease. He just seemed so natural. So I gave him a badge, gave him a lot of capital, and he walked into a pit. And when I walked into a pit, I can't tell you the harassment I got. I mean, I had people putting their nose 2 inches from mine, yelling and screaming and spitting, and you know, they just didn't want the competition there because I was really good. And I took, you know, the money I made means less money for them, they felt. Yeah. So he walks into a pit. Everyone likes him. He was tall. He was good looking. He was easy. He was amiable. He was funny. People gravitated to him. He traded the system. He didn't vary from the system. He didn't have a need to try to show off or be right or think where the market was going. He just made money from day friggin' one. And so after about 6 months of just making almost as much money as I was, I said, Tyson, I need some help. I have some traders that are stuck. I want you to teach them. He was totally lost. Since I had struggled and come up the hard way, I knew every bump in the friggin' road. But he grew up well-loved. He grew up confident in himself. His life experiences were all positive. He just totally expected the world to be part of his success.
Yeah.
And he was so respectful of the world and so in tune with, when you looked at him, you just wanted to be part of that. Yeah. So the answer is no traders. There's no traders that come without baggage, and I have no idea how to explain Tyson.
He's definitely an outlier, the black swan. Yeah. That's interesting. Do you think it helps if you catch people at an earlier age, so that when they start trading earlier? Because is it true that maybe as you get older, maybe you carry more baggage, or do you think that doesn't even matter? Doesn't matter what age you start trading?
I haven't noticed any correlation there.
Okay.
In fact, probably the younger the better. The older, the more challenging.
And women versus men, do you find any difference between
women
female and male traders?
Are so much better. Oh my gosh, as a whole. They are willing to explore themselves. They're willing to take responsibility. They're willing to learn. I mean, men, comes from our hunter DNA, and we want to kill the beast, and we want to be the one in the tribe that kills the beast, and we want the acclamations for bringing home the food, and we have a tremendous amount of ego attached to our trading. I mean, I've had traders who lie to me, or they're paying me a lot of money. I charge $500 an hour for my coaching. And they will lie to me about their results as though, so we men have a lot of testosterone. We have a lot of ego. Yeah. We have we need to beat the market. Whereas the really good trader doesn't have that. He says, okay, there's the market. I'm going to let it talk to me. I'm going to be in the zone. I'm going to be there. I have no need to brag in a trading room. In fact, I'm not going to even tell people how much I make, because that's not where my self-esteem comes from. Right. So us men probably have more to overcome than women. The women, again, this is really, I don't want to be sexist here and quantify things, but there is a difference in that the women do tend, the lack of that kind of male testosterone, A-type personality, it makes it more difficult to go sometimes through the challenging parts because we don't have that driving force.
The same drive, yeah.
Yeah. Now, having said that, I know men and women who are on all sides of that continuum, so I certainly don't want to create a sexist debate after this.
No, it's very interesting insight. And I was just thinking, as you were saying that, I was thinking about the book by John Coates, The Hour Between Dog and Wolf.
Oh, that is everyone should read that book.
It's a great book. Yeah, I definitely have that on one of my top favorite books to read around trading. So, what are some of the roles around hormones and neurotransmitters in trading? You talked about testosterone, how that can get you into trouble. What are is there something that we can do as traders, kind of tactically, to kind of modulate, the expression of these, of these hormones or neurotransmitters? Can we do certain things like activities or exercises to get us in the right state of mind or the right physical, presence to trade?
Mm-hmm. Well, what have you done that you found that works?
For me, number one, I think, and I don't know what the role is between this and neurotransmitters and hormones, but certainly meditation has helped quite a bit for myself. I've talked about this on previous podcasts, but meditation for me just kind of given me the ability to create space between decisions. Mm-hmm. So I find that to be very interesting. And the other, I'm a big believer in kind of high intensity, any kind of high intensity work, whether it's training or even trading. Spending times of really deep focus, and then having the ability to just kind of relax and not be focused and just kind of completely replenish myself. So those types of activities I find out, from a physical perspective, I think allows me to be a little more even keel with my trading.
Mm-hmm.
I don't seem to be so, if we use your set scale, I'm not like hovering at a 5, as I'm able to, kind of modulate myself by kind of being more even keel.
Excellent.
You have any ideas?
Oh man. Well, then again, that's a whole another hour just on that.
Sure. But, we need a part 2 here.
We talk. What you talk about is what I call a break state, and that is where we can break our normal reactions. Right. So, for example, one of the things that I do is a slow, deep breath. In fact, Navy SEALs are taught this.
Box breathing.
It's slow. What I do is I 6 count for, and depending on the size of your lungs, this could vary, but a slow 6 count for inhale, hold for 4, slow 6 count release, and then let the air out for 4 and let it sit there.
Yeah.
And what this does is, if we're going, you can actually start to feel afraid. So what happens is, if our amygdala which is the fight or flight part of our brain, is triggered, because let's say the trade is going against us, and we start rapid breathing and we have all the physiological adrenaline rush going on, then what happens is the amygdala checks with the neocortex, the thinking part of our brain, and says, hey, because the amygdala is so fast, it reacts like that. But then what it does is it checks with our brain, our neocortex, and say, hey, now that I've got us in panic mode and we're ready, is there any reason really to continue? And the neocortex normally says, no reason to continue. It's all fine. There's no danger. But what sometimes happens is, and this is in PTSD, is that the brain, the neocortex, will look at the body, noticing we're breathing fast, knowing we're adrenalizing, notice our muscle tense, and say, oh my God, something must be wrong. Look at what our body is doing. So then we get into this loop that just keeps going. So our amygdala can be fooled by doing the slow, deep breathing, because if we're doing slow, deep breathing, we don't do that when we're panicked. So the SEALs are taught this, armed forces, policemen. And so what I've done is, whenever I've done this so much now that whenever there is an intense situation, even if my wife yells at me for something, and of course she never yells at me.
You're a saint.
Well, who can yell at this place? But, right away I go.
Yeah.
And boy, does that just calm me down.
Yeah.
I could go into another hour about relationships and slow breathing around relationships. But so that's a break state, and that really helps. In fact, more and more I'm doing that, and just during the day, just every now and then, just doing that. And I can drop my blood pressure 20 points. I've got a blood pressure machine here that I'm just starting to experiment with. I can drop it 20 points by doing slow breathing for 5 minutes.
Yeah, and I've played a lot with, tracking heart rate as well as heart rate variability. And just by doing, like you said, that deep breathing, and, I've tried like heart breathing where you put your hand over your heart. And as you're wearing your heart rate monitor, you can literally just, as you breathe in and you try to breathe through your heart, you imagine, the breath coming into your heart and breathing it out again. My heart rate will drop in easily 10, 15 beats just by spending that bit of focus and thinking about the heart rate breathing. So that breathing then, so like you said, it kind of turns off the flight or flight, or maybe turns down the level of arousal.
Yes.
Because, the neocortex doesn't have a trigger at that point to say, all right, I need to look for maybe some danger.
Exactly right. And so that's really just a great exercise. Yeah.
And so what do you think? Is there for new traders, is there genuinely, in your opinion, is there a best place for new traders to kind of start with trading? Like, is it best first to start with the systems and methodology, and then progress to psychology, or do you have a preferred kind of journey for traders to develop themselves?
Yeah, start in a sim account. Start with a real simple strategy. It doesn't matter almost what it was, even a moving average crossover, whatever it is. And just learn to execute that, execute it. And then if you execute it consistently 100% of the time, you don't miss any trades, you don't avoid pulling the trigger on any trades, and then you can evaluate the system. And by doing that, you get used to execution first, because, over and over again, the traders I get have gotten either complex systems or unclear, and they've lost money and they're afraid to pull the trigger, or they intuitively trade off the system, and it's hard even to determine whether the system is viable because they've introduced so many psychological variables into it.
Right.
The other piece of it is, and we just don't have much time, is how we look at strategies. And I like to flip strategies on their head, but not by looking at what strategy can I use, but what is the quality of the market right now, and to focus more on that. And that is a whole another hour in and of itself. But there's just so much for new traders. But just to start simple and start training your brain to create these new neural patterns that you can build on as you get more complex.
Yeah. And then when do you start developing the psychology part of trading? Does that just come as happenstance once you start to see how you're reacting to your system and how you're managing your trade plan and how compliant you are? Or do you have to kind of stumble into it once you screw up?
I'm a trading psychologist. I want to start right away because your self-awareness and 100% of trading is psychological, and especially for the independent, non-algorithmic trader. And so as a result, that is the biggest influence, and that, I believe, is where our attention needs to be. The strategies, the methodologies, the markets, they can all come later. But if we've got our mindset straight, the rest is fairly easy. Yeah,
great. And we are running low on time, so I'm just going to maybe just fast fire a couple of quick questions for you, as I just love for you to share maybe one more tactic to traders. So what would you advise to a trader who is having real issues? They have a setup, a strategy they define. It's pretty simple, but they're still having real issues with compliance. They just can't seem to follow the signals. What would you advise that person? Do you have any tips or tactics?
Yeah, so I have tried to undo some decisions I've made in the past, and it's really difficult. Go back in time and redo it. It's just really hard. The time machines are expensive, and they're not that good.
Not reliable.
And I've tried to make decisions in the future for myself. So going into the future and making those better decisions. And again, that's really difficult. But I can make a decision right now. So the important focus is to be in the now, be aware of everything, and bring those awareness to that moment where it is relatively easy to make new behaviors. So just focusing on the now, being aware of it, and being aware of the voices in your head, your physiology, and being aware of the hesitation. Well, that's interesting. I'm hesitating to make this trade. There's something there that has positive intent for me. Again, rapport with yourself, positive intent, being curious about it, and letting it be. Because if you can just let yourself be and accept all those parts, eventually they will start to evolve on their own, as versus the two-story nut house where you're trying to discipline yourself.
I like that. That's great advice. So maybe just one more question. You recommend, we talked about John Coates' book, or The Hour Between Dog and Wolf. Do you have any other trading books or any kind of related material that you would recommend traders to read up on?
Mark Douglas is good. Steenbarger is good. And there's just a lot of great books. So just beware when a coach tells you need more discipline. That means
that's a red flag.
Red flag. They really are. They are buying into the bifurcation of your brain and the two-story nut house. And I think that for me and my life, and let's forget about trading for a moment. But let's just look at our lives. How do we want to live our lives? If we're fighting ourselves, how can we love others? If we accept and love ourselves and notice ourselves and be curious about ourselves, we can now transfer that same feeling for others. My relationship with my wife and my kids has improved immensely as I learn to love myself. As I learn to accept myself, I'm able to accept them. And as a result, when people are around me, I am much more attractive. I am much more engaging. I'm a much better salesman. as I have stopped fighting myself and accepting all my parts.
Yeah.
Wow, what a change it can be for everyone as we move toward that place of self-kindness, self-acceptance, and allow ourselves to build that rapport so all parts of ourselves are working together.
Yeah, well said. We don't need to beat ourselves up as traders. That's part of the business, but we don't have to reinforce that by by building beliefs and mindsets around that. What a great way to end things. So, Rich, I just want to thank you again for today's call. So many great nuggets. What's the best place people can stay in contact with you? If they love what you said, where can they engage you further? Where can people follow you?
Yeah, rich at mindmuscles.com, plural, rich at mindmuscles.com, or you can go to mindmusclesfortraders.com. Awesome. And Mind Muscles for Traders, I love talking to almost everyone. I love meeting new traders. I love talking to people who are stuck, because sometimes in 10 minutes, I have had dramatic shifts because people have shifted just the way they look at the problem. Yeah. So feel free to contact me. We have online courses, we have recordings, we have boot camps, we have private coaching. So I'm happy to engage people in terms of their budget, in terms of their needs, and I'm always willing to talk to somebody to figure out how they can improve their lives, because that's where my heart is. I tell you, I come from this, and to see people changing their lives just is so thrilling to me. I just love that, and that's a big part of what I get out of this.
I appreciate your work. Thank you so much, Rich.
Okay, take care, Houston.
Yeah, so just one more thing before I wrap up. I just want to say that, as usual, I want to link to all the things that Rich talked about here in the show notes. We'll have a transcript of our call, and all the resources will be there as well. So if you want, you can go to thetradingedge.org/episode 10. And for all the listeners, what's the one big insight you got from today's podcast? I'd love for you guys to drop us a line in the comment section. And, Rich gave us a lot of tactics and ideas today. So what would you be willing to try? So take one thing from today. I don't want it just to be information that no one uses. Mm-hmm. Try one thing, right? Rich really layered a lot of stuff. So pick one thing, try for seven days or 30 days, and let us know how that changed your trading. All right.
Perfect.
Thank you again, Rich. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Houston. You take care and have a most wonderful day.
You too. Take care. Bye now.
You've been listening to the Trading Edges podcast. We've taken this interview and summarized all the big ideas so that you can take action. Just head over to thetradingedge.org/podcast to find the show notes, transcript, resources, and to continue the conversation.